Hi, everybody. This is Warren Herman, and today we're going to continue our exploration of psychological themes while thinking about the movie Star Wars and understanding how these different themes impact our spiritual life and can really touch on the subject of what we might call vocational discernment and what St. Ignatius of Loyola talks about in the discernment of spirits, meaning understanding where or what kind of impulses we're having so we know which impulses in ourselves to follow and which ones not to follow. I think it's very important that I've been watching some different videos on the subject of the psychoanalysis of certain Star Wars characters. And these are triggered by insights from this certain video that I don't know the name of, that I may try to track down what it is. But mostly it's my reactions to the things in the video, so it's not like I'm just stealing what they said, but I'll try to see if I can put a link maybe or something to what the original video was that kind of triggered some of this stuff. One of the ideas that they shared in this video, it really talked a lot about things that are our unconscious motives that are leading us to be deceived by the different impulses that, happen inside of us. And so, for example, they spoke a lot about the way in which we have shame. And shame is what often drives, or our self-hatred. It often drives a lot of behaviors that may not otherwise seem to be dark and motivated by hatred or these negative things. But shame is this deep toxic thing, and it was very beautiful the way they framed shame as a kind of a disconnection. Like, so for example, for a man, they said shame is any kind of like a disconnection from our masculinity. For a woman, shame is disconnection from our femininity. It is an affront to our human dignity. That is shame. And it's so, for example, if there are certain ways in which we cannot be masculine or cannot be feminine, we are ashamed of who we are. And so this is something that is, I think this is very interesting. Because, so for example, and this can lead to many complex different types of behaviors. So for example, someone who is ashamed of the inability, for example, to make money may develop an anti-materialistic attitude and may seem very spiritual and may seem very judgmental of money and these kind of things and the pursuit of success. But it's really a bitterness. It's kind of the story of sour grapes, so to speak. It's not a mature renunciation of the world. It is merely, I can't get it, so I hate it because I hate myself, and I hate the paradigm that makes me worthless, the paradigm of masculinity that makes me a worthless person. So I will rebel against it by rejecting the values, the people who stand for those values, so on and so forth. So, a hatred of society, a hatred of family life, a hatred of any of these things can be actually a shame reaction, for example, that's hidden toward, and it turns into rage. And it was really beautiful how in this video they described how sometimes when we are having a shame reaction, it is kind of like an animal that has been cornered. And they talked about how rage and shame are deeply related, because shame and this ongoing rage, it holds in place many behaviors, because shame is about who we are. So it allows this anger because anger is this attempt to escape from, who we are. So let's say somebody has failed in relationships, and somebody has, have been disappointed, in normal human life and all of its aspects. They may say, I'm driven to be a priest or something like that. But the thing is, what may really be going on is that they are really having a deep-seated that anger at the life being a failure can actually drive and cement in the psyche this sense of vocation as a compensation for the failures and the shame. And then, if I have a vocation, then I'm not a failure, and then I'm something else. And that can really be very dangerous, because then the vocation is really an intrusive thought that's being generated by this kind of unconscious dynamic. And so it's very interesting. We have to be very aware of our shame, aware of our failures, aware of what we might be compensating for. Because our minds, underneath the surface, there can be this deep way in which the mind is trying to make a solution to our shame through that rage, that hatred of those things. And it can be very subtle. It can be something that is disguised as, for example, a religious vocation. It can be disguised as, going to church all the time. It can make you have a kind of makes the religion, which should be like the clothes given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, those clothes of redemption. It makes religion into the fig leaves of our own false self. It makes it serve the purposes of covering shame in an inappropriate way, in a non-integrative way, because in this video they talked about that necessity of integrating things. And the thing is, they talked about, they were linking things to the movie Star Wars, and they talked about how the Jedi represent the super ego, and this is very clear because they represent over control. They are top heavy, so to speak. That's a term that I would use for it. And the Sith are about indulging the impulses. They are bottom heavy. And so I'm being visited by many gnats, if you can see them going around my head. So they become bottom heavy. And so the thing is, there's not this pathway in the movies toward a kind of character that has this kind of balance between, the moderation and integration of the passions. And that's the journey that we're really called on. It's not to be top heavy or bottom heavy. And it was really beautiful because this leads us into this other theme, which is this idea that vocation is not about any of these ego. It's not about being having a super ego trip and thinking we're great and we're covering over this stuff by over control and pretending that we're detached when really we've just given up and we're having a sour grapes complex like a Jedi. And it's also not about going crazy for materialism and being like, yeah, well, I'm going to get what I want and get mad and I'm going to break out of everything and I'm just going to get what I want and what I need. That's not you don't want to go that route either as the Sith, It's like, so it's not that neither of those are good, but it's moderation and integration. And that's the foundation of vocation. Because, there's this thing where, there's this thing where, if we're not free of these burdens, we can't genuinely be called to, what Joseph Campbell called the hero's journey. Because we're really just having this kind of false symbolism. You're kind of improperly using various things in symbolic ways that are not like, we're not living the symbolic world in God's symbolic world. We're kind of making our own meaning of things in this kind of egoic or super egoic drama of trying to say, okay, trying to make something of ourselves or get something for ourselves. That's kind of what ends up happening. And so we need to have a kind of freedom in order to be genuinely called to something, I'm really getting attacked by the little gnats. In order to genuinely be called to something, we need to have a much more real freedom. We can't just have, because the real journey is not about this kind of weird ego game. It's about integration. It's not about, okay, I found a way to cover over, I found the fig leaves to cover over my shame. It's about meeting God. It's about meeting God and being reconciled to God and being given the animal skins like Adam and Eve that were reflected like it was given to them because out of love. It's not about fig leaves, and that's the problem. So the thing is, of course, sometimes in these journeys we can have temporary peace that can come from finding a fig leaf, finding a new relationship, believing you have a religious vocation. These kind of things can cover over the shame and pain, but maybe only for a time, and then the deep longings and the unconscious forces begin to percolate and come up. This is why you see, this humorous therapist, he said, I went into being a therapist because it was a humorous thing. He said, because it was the only access I could get to women. That was the only time women would talk to me as a therapist. But you can see, of course, he's laughing about it. But if that becomes an actual, an unrecognized motivation, easily this can set up a therapist for a fall. Or the same thing with the priest. Like when we use that vocation or position as a fig leaf rather than a genuine expression of self-gift and love, then we can easily be taken over by unconscious motives. And I'm fallen. I believe that this is something that happens in a lot of times in issues where we have different high-profile scandals in the Catholic Church. Sometimes what happens is that people seem to be called to the priesthood, but maybe at least part of that, or their ego drama is attached to that, and then they kind of are building up themselves and kind of using vocation as a fig leaf to like kind of cover shame. And that's because they're not loved, and because they're not loved, then it makes them vulnerable to, becoming essentially like predatory in a way, because if they don't have this, their love, if they don't feel loved, they don't have security, and then they could easily fall to temptation if they seem to get attention and the appearance of intimacy from, like a parishioner or somebody. So that is some of the different things there. I'm getting attacked by the little gnats are really going after me. And I think the thing is that the gnats are actually a really good analogy, because the thing is they there's a reason why the gnats are coming, because they can smell my breath. It's like there's something living here that's kind of coming along. They can smell me. And in the same way, there's this real way in which the different intrusions and the intrusive thoughts that we have are rooted in the shame and the resentment and the fears that that we endure in our lives. And so the reason why you're having thoughts, oh, maybe I should run away and quit my job and stop doing everything and do drugs, whatever it is, or maybe I should go and be a priest, maybe I should stop. Whenever there's a thing of despair, like, okay, nobody loves me, you can see something is wrong. And it's kind of like that way to discern. It's beautiful in the Star Wars metaphor, to be able to discern the dark side. And maybe there's hidden, that we have to unmask deceptive things in our minds. Because the thing is, if we look at Star Wars, for example, it's like it's very clear that, in the third episode of the prequels, Anakin is being given these premonitions, which are being inserted into his mind to make him fall to the temptation to turn to the dark side. And so the thing is, we have to realize, what's that premonition that we're having, or what's that fear that we're having? What's that? And we could see, obviously, losing his wife was his fear, and that was his deep shame and anger, was when he was ashamed of not being able to save his mother. And then that shame turned into rage of him murdering the Sand People. And, and we could see that shame in the same way. He's not going to tolerate that shame anymore, that deep wound. And so we see the shame and the fear of helplessness, and the shame and the anger and the fear. It's almost like an unholy trinity of interacting psychological forces that are kind of, just like the Trinity kind of mutually pours itself out into each other. We can almost see this evil cycling of these energies in the unconscious. And so we see it then generate, the thing of like, oh, well, I'm clearly have vocation to the dark side. It's like we see, that desire to, become Darth Vader, to turn to that other mentor figure and to get his approval. And to, he pledges himself to the teachings of the Sith, it kind of gets that new father figure, in a way. There's a lot of different dynamics there we can analyze further, but it's really looking at if maybe to be suspicious if in our minds and our lives there are shame, fear, anger, these unconscious motives. It's possible that motives that look good. So, for example, if I even if we take little Anakin, like, oh, he wants to be a Jedi, maybe because he's ashamed of being a slave. He wants to be all powerful. He projects these egoic motives onto it. Or, let's say there's like in the Jedi, if we want to use this as a broader thing, the Jedi style of life, there is an unconscious motive of not wanting to be hurt. And so that's not good. That's the dark side. That is a fear. And that's setting us up for a fall, because we can't have genuine peace if we don't have an integrated psyche, because we're not experiencing interior integration. We're experiencing the life of fig leaves and defensiveness and these type of things. And so that is really going to give us a problem. And so in the same way, like if we try to go for the Sith route, these addictions, they can give us temporary relief, but they're not going to truly bring us integrated peace. And that's, so that's kind of a thing that we can think about with this. So I hope that this helps unmask those secret manifestations of of what St. Ignatius calls the evil spirit, or the Star Wars would call it the dark side. As Luke says, how can I tell the good side from the bad? And these are some rules and some ways that we can really think about these things and try to really overcome this stuff. Because one of the beautiful things in the video was the discussion of Anakin as becoming like a shame monster. And all of us, that's what we become. We become distorted. We become either monsters or angels. We become inhuman as a result, I believe, of shame in different ways. So like shame can make us into the Jedi, and shame can make us into a Sith. And the thing is, but love makes us into a saint. We're not supposed to be an angel. We're not supposed to be a demon. We're supposed to be human with the help of God. And that's the only way we can be human. And so that's the pathway to the moderation and integration of the passions. And it really is a pathway of learning to forgive, of learning to be loved, of learning to find that to heal the father wounds, to heal the mother wounds, whatever it is, like to really reorganize and reconnect with the things that are those antidotes to shame, so we can know our like that we are loved, and to change the foundations of what we are doing. Because if those foundations are incorrect, and everything is coming out of a basement in our mind of shame and fear and anger, then we will be driven unconsciously to do many things that will lead to our suffering and destruction. As Yoda says, once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. And he says, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And so as we discern between these movements, as he also said, you'll be able to tell the difference when you're calm and you're passive, and you can kind of be reflective about. And he says also the Jedi uses his power for knowledge and defense, never for attack. And if we have these secret cycling motives, there's this kind of unconscious attack that we have, even in things that look kind of look good. Like it looks good. Oh, I want to be a monk, or I want to be patient. But maybe you're just maybe you're just afraid of confrontation, or maybe you're just trying to run away from the places where you failed, and just to give up on playing the game because you don't want to feel emasculated anymore. It's like, so we have to really learn how to love and to be loved, so that we can overcome the roots of our unconscious struggles and become integrated people.